Now it's obvious the world is evolving for all of us in many, many different ways, and there's a whole range of uncertainty. And L&D is also struggling with this in many, many organisations. I'd love to hear, Dorotea, what you're actually seeing and hearing in the L&D space right now.
Yes, it's a very, very good question, Glenn, because these are unprecedented times. And it's absolutely crazy what is happening in the whole world to all of us because of the pandemic. And so what I hear and what I sense from the conversations with learning and development people in charge is that HR people, for example, are really now in the forefront for the re-entry into business dynamic, rather than just being in the background, making sure that everything flows. They are the ones with all the weight on their shoulders and having to deal with this complete huge gap of having a great amount of the workforce at home and having to help them to be productive, to be present, to still collaborate from home, and at the same time deal with everything else. So they are like this key figure right now between leadership and working re-entry that needs to be supported in all possible way, because they are the ones supporting everybody else. That's what I sense as the main huge and really unprecedented situation right now.
Yeah, great. And Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you, Dorotea. It's really unprecedented in this time. This is probably, as they say, once in 50 years or kind of thing that's happening right now. So, well, this is still a perfect opportunity for firms to transform their L&D at this point, right? Because there's this huge disruption, and clients have been toying with this idea of virtual, back then in a couple of years, quite a number of years ago, and that is what we have been working on at AG, and hence how Nobi actually came out, which I'll tell you a little bit more later. But right now, what this pandemic has done is actually accelerated our digital transformation, right? Accelerated our learning transformation, and this gives us a great chance for us to take and to effect change, because employees right now are more open to change when you introduce new stuff, new concept, new ways of working, new ways of learning.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joel, but at the same time I also sense this this overwhelming feeling in all the learning and development people that also don't always understand what is a virtual blended learning, and they have these misconceptions about what is is it like the online, is it like one way? So there's a lot of clarification to be done on what is possible, and indeed, like you, I agree that the possibilities are really infinite of what can be done and really crucial in this moment.
You're absolutely right.
It's probably good timing there. Just check in with the actual participants. So there's about, I think there's close to 60 people who have dialed in so far. Love to get just in the chat section there, what does VBL mean to you? When you think of virtual blended learning and you think about it within your organization, what does it actually mean to you? So in the chat section there, we'd just love to hear from a few people in regards to what does VBL mean to you? And just while they're coming in, Joelle, would you like to, what's it mean to you? What does VBL mean to you? Because certainly within AG, within Awaken Group, all of the work that we had booked in our capability space for March, April, the ones that were face-to-face, shifted very quickly. So what does VBL mean to you?
Well, how we define virtual blended learning and Awaken Group is that it is a combination of platforms, right, that we use, or the tools to create a human-centered learning experience. And I just want to talk a little bit on the point on human-centered, right? If we go back to the times even before COVID, where we're all doing traditional classroom learning. How do people learn? They come in, and then of course there's a lot of interactions with the trainer, between the trainers and the learners, right? And they do sharing, they do discussions, they do practice questions and live cases. How do you actually translate all of that onto the online scene or into the virtual scene? And what we're using right here is using tools to facilitate that learner experience that recreates that.
Right. Thanks, James. Thanks, Emma, Philip, Simons, for your comments there too. Andy, Dorotea.
Yeah.
VBL.
VBL for me, as Joel pointed out, is something that actually I have been doing since the beginning, weirdly enough, because when I started in this learning facilitation career a long time ago, I already had this very clear demand and request towards my client that they be open to programs that stretch in time. So at the time, it was just the idea of blended learning, because platforms didn't exist for doing what we can do now. But instead of doing this 2 days intervention, 3 days intervention, I said, if you want to work with me, I prefer to stretch things over a few weeks, maybe a few months, so that people can really make the shift between their working life, what they have to learn, and what is happening in their everyday life, and fill that gap on their own. So for me, a VBL contains 3 components. One, self-paced dynamic that the learner takes on their own, but that today can be incredibly interactive with the rest of the participants that are part of the group, with the platform that we use. For example, I love Nobi, that we will all talk to you about later. And the real dynamic of the interaction in an asynchronous way, so on their own time, in their own time zone. And then the second element is a very lively interactive workshop using breakout rooms where people can go discuss things in groups of 3 or 4, and then come back and share in plenary. And it's amazing when these 2 things are combined already. It is extremely powerful, the impact. And then the third element, which can be placed anywhere, is the coaching element. And it's nice to sandwich it, along the way. And Awaken does things this way as well, I believe. And that this simple combination of these 3 elements of a virtual blended learning is really powerful. And I've seen it for years, and now all the more is needed, I believe.
Yeah. Hey, just on that, Dorotea, the third point there around the coaching,
Yeah.
there was a question here from Prakash before in regards to, wanted to ask you if executive coaching lends itself to online interactions. What are some of the key elements to keep in mind to be successful?
Okay, so for the, if I understand the question correctly, he's asking whether when you do VBL for executive coaching or leaders, let's say, how to use that. Is that the question?
Yeah. So can you do executive coaching online?
Of course,
of course.
It will be a combination. It will be, and it's beautiful because you have your session with your leader, but then you can send the questions ahead, have him start, reflect, write down, because, for example, the platform that I use, Nobi, enables you to really put qualitative answer, self-reflection moment. So it's a beautiful tool to sort of surround your real coaching session that you have with your client, in not face-to-face, because we can't now, but in a Zoom or WebEx or whatever situation where you see each other at least. And then you continue the coaching, and you started before. So it's a really fabulous tool to combine with it.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing. So thank you for that, Dorotea. Love to, Joel, can you just talk to us a bit about, from a VBL point of view, about being effective with today's situation?
Yes, Glenn. I think a lot of people have that, the misconception that VBL is right now going to be a stopgap measure, and we just have to do this and hold everything in place until everything returns to normal. And that's one of the biggest myths that I'm here to bust, right? Let me just share with you a few key statistics, right? It's impactful. They found that multimedia learning actually increases retention rates by up to 60%. It's cost and time efficient. One of the auditing firms actually found that they were able to reduce their training cost by condensing so many hours of learning into really targeted 1,400 hours of VBL. And lastly, it helps to shift that mindset, right? Where firms become more agile. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding the effectiveness, would you like me to comment as well?
Love to hear your perspective. Yeah.
For me, the effectiveness really comes in this relevance, and in the specific current times we are in, we have to change and adapt that relevance all the time. So the beauty of having that asynchronous portion that can be a dialogue, an interaction, means that when your participants, after, let's say, a specific session that you had together, tell you, because you asked them, this is my need right now, this I would like to explore, and this, you can actually adapt, shift, and make whatever next session is, or both the asynchronous and the synchronous, when we're all together again, really respond to that. And you can scale that, because it doesn't have to be for, I don't know, 12 participants at a time. You can do it with thousands, because the analytics in the back shows you what people really think, what people really want. And that's really precious. So the effectiveness of a VBL in these particular times is really incredible, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, Dorotea, you just now talked about scaling, right? The fact that you are doing virtual, right? You can hold classroom sessions for more than like 30 participants, right? We try to keep our class size small in terms of traditional classroom learning. But for VBL, you can bring this to a whole bigger audience, right? And you can do it on a global level as well. And which also leads me to the point that it is cost effective. Right? You think about it, in your usual traditional classroom, you have to fly your people in from different countries in for a 3-day workshop or whatever it is, right? And then you have to pay for the accommodation, you have to pay for the food, and then after 3 days, you ship them back home, right? And all these costs, they can be more efficiently used and reinvested back into a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way you can do it, even when you have large numbers, you make your webinar extremely interactive, and you still use breakout rooms, so people will be in smaller groups discussing, and so you have that personal feeling of that touch, that you met somebody as if you had been to that learning 2 days apart. So you have to really design it with a lot of thought. There's a lot of things that are not easy. You have to be explicit. You have to do a lot of work ahead and during, but it's definitely possible to bring that same quality, and let's say not even the same quality, a whole new dimension. It is, like your title say, it's about transformation, the way we think of learning as a whole way of transforming things and people along the way. We have to transform the way we think of facilitating and delivering learning, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah. And maybe I just want to take you through also a couple of things that, just the AG story, the Nobi story actually, that when it spun out of AG, I think Dorotea can talk to that later as well. But I just want to say that, when clients actually come to us about learning, they come to us with a lot of questions. And one of them is, how can we transform the learning experience? How can we be cost efficient? How can we scale? And the thing is, when we looked at platforms outside or alternatives outside to traditional classroom learning, we didn't find a suitable one, which is why, Nobi was spun out of Awaken Group in 2016 to actually do transformational learning. So part of it in Nobi is to create a seamless experience for the learner. So I'm just going to go through here a couple of slides. Next slide. Yeah, so the way that Dorotea described just now, learning can be self-paced at this point in time. It can be personalized. Next. And what we aim to do is to create a community of learners that is outside the classroom, that learning doesn't stop, after your 3-day workshop. Learning continues with those same people that went through with you the entire course. Next. And also, it's about being able to track real-time metrics. Yeah, it's so important to tie whatever you've learned to real-time impact. And at this point, Nobi allows for us to receive quantitative and qualitative feedback at the same time. Dorotea probably can talk to a lot more about Nobi. She is an ardent fan.
Yes, I am. You want me to do it now or later?
Yeah, do it now, particularly if you've got a concrete, there's a question there from Philip Clark in regards to a concrete example in that space.
Yes. Okay, so exactly, I don't know, to answer to Philip, for example, a concrete example about this qualitative response. I was like, right now I'm running a virtual blended learning with a group of 8 people, so very small. However, it's really incredible how we've been able to transform the sessions because of the qualitative feedback that we asked and received. So that when the next session went on, they were all open mouth to say, incredible, how did you do it so fast, both in the learning on Nobi, and then today it's exactly what I asked you last time. And so it's a dialogue. It's a conversation with your learners, and it's absolutely amazing and thrilling from the learning facilitation point of view, but also on the other side, of course, because they really feel heard. They really learn, and then the engagement just multiplies. I hope that's concrete enough.
Okay. So, and maybe just continue to build on that. Like Dorotea, if you can start us here. You're a learner, and you coach and teach learning. So you've got your philosophy around learning. So I'd love to hear a bit about that. But also too, how does your philosophy actually shape, how you approach VBL? Because there'll be many people who are listening in here who are either within organizations and are thinking, okay, how do we maximize VBL? Because the world's not going back to how it was. So how do we maximize that from a philosophy point of view? And there'll also be people who are trainers who are actually working out. I used to run face-to-face workshops all the time. So how do I actually modify my approach?
Right. So 2 questions here. The first one about the philosophy. And I became conscious of my philosophy afterwards, that I actually had it. That was driving everything I was doing. And my philosophy has always been, since 2002, about making learning a journey and about making learning a conversation and a dialogue. So that's why it's always been the coaching approach, even with a classroom, so to say, situation. So that philosophy translates particularly well in the VBL, because you can have that dialogue on so many different levels. And for me, it's about being there for your learners, being able to adapt, and being able to be relevant at all times as things move for them. And so that's the philosophy behind. Now, regarding the face-to-face, I have to share a personal story. Because when I started giving virtual classrooms, they called them at the time, a few years back, I was literally shoved into this experience. It was a program where we were taking care of 600 managers and leaders, and the whole program was a blended learning, and in this case, a virtual blended learning already, and it was spreading over 8 months, more or less. And so there was this alternation between sessions that would be virtual classes, coaching, work that they did on their own platform, and it was very well designed and constructed. But when I came in as an executive coach initially, and then I was asked, please, can you lead the virtual sessions? And my first response was like, no way, this cannot work. How can I have the same presence? How can I have the same interaction? How can I have the same connection I have in a classroom in a stupid virtual situation where I can see only the head of people? It was like this. And then I remember thinking that, feeling that, and I had to make a very fast decision as the person was asking. And so I said, okay, let me throw myself into this, because I know I will bring my way of doing things, and I'll ask to be there. And so I found my way to make these virtual workshops extremely lively and interactive. And the way I did it, for anybody who needs to do it themselves, is take nothing for granted. Really talk about the explicit things that need to be done in this workshop, and start by the very virtual situation that you're in. So you say to people, look, this is a virtual situation. It's very complicated. We're all there, different time zone. Something happened just before, etc. But can you please be there for this time? I need you for this. I need you for that. And then give them space to express themselves. Whatever way you design your workshop, they need space. So although Joel said before, you can do it with large numbers, the ideal number is up to 12. And then if you have large numbers, you multiply that dynamic so that you have a small number every time, where this conversation, this interaction can happen. And then magic happens. It's really, really powerful. Combine it with coaching, the third element, and there you go. You have a successful recipe.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well put. Joel, just before I get you to share your philosophy and the connection there, being it's a virtual and the webinar, I just got a virtual kick up the bottom. We're Mr. Poll. So if I could just get the poll put up, please. Just love to hear, once again, from the people who are dialed in, connected. Poll there. Have you already experimented with VBL in your organisation? And just quickly there, just got 20 seconds. Either yes, we've had good results through experimenting with it. Yes, but without much impact so far. Or no, we haven't actually tried it as yet. So just love to understand where people are at around their VBL journey, their VBL experience. Maybe just while we're just waiting for that, just the results there, Dorotea. Just connected to what you just said before, got a question there from Audrey in regards to how do you ensure in this virtual world, how do you keep the energy up with participants? How do you keep them motivated? And I'm seeing some of the comments that are coming through about, the tone down the showmanship and so on. So how do you actually do that, keep that energy?
Right. That's really relevant, and that's what I come back always to the same point, is the interaction. The energy comes. Have you ever noticed in a normal conversation, when there is a person speaking more than the others, little by little, the energy goes down in the others.
Yeah.
Right? This is the same with synchronous and asynchronous training when we are all on our own. So if there is the possibility for people to feel engaged that means I give you my opinion. I give you my thoughts. I tell you with authenticity, and you have to create that same safe space where people can really say what they believe, think, need. And that's the key to the energy for me.
Very cool. Yeah. Are the results there? Okay. So have you already experimented? We've got 14, so 40%, 20%, and 40%. Okay. So still a fair bit of the audience here that haven't actually tried VBL as yet. So obviously be learning there, and also you'd be out in the 20%. So 60% still have an opportunity here to create the best value from a VBL. Joel, can you just share just briefly your connection to that philosophy? Because I really want to hear from you in regards to the framework and the ecosystem, because I think that's super important.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I'm just looking at one of these comments from Emma, and Emma says, VBL will focus highly on learning and on the learner's needs rather than the teacher and the teaching. Yep. And how we look at it is VBL is a learning experience. And, you know, Dorotea mentioned, how do we still connect to people in this time? And she was telling a story about how she was shocked about how she's going to lead a virtual session, right? If you look at learning experience and you compare it to user experience, each detail is so important, right? For example, in a traditional classroom setting, people are a lot more forgiving. Learners are a lot more forgiving, and when a trainer makes a mistake, you know, or some things are not going according to plan, they are able to empathize with the trainer, and because they can see them face to face, right? And the thing I noticed with virtual is that people are less forgiving, right? And because there is this medium of technology that separates us, which is why they also have higher standards for learning as compared to, you know, traditional classroom teaching as well. So you see at this point, learner experience really becomes so much more important. Every detail matters, every detail counts. You know, even the slightest mishap, the slightest, inconvenience actually leaves the learners very disconnected from the entire experience.
That's great. We might just move on now to the ecosystem, because I think that's really an important element too for everybody, particularly having worked in the L&D space for many, many years in a large organisation. Joel, can you just talk us through, obviously we've been talking a lot about learners' experience. There's so many elements that impact the learner's experience, and understanding the whole ecosystem is vital. Can you share some insight on this?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Glenn. So what you see at the heart of the ecosystem, right, is the learning experience. And maybe let me just cycle back to what is this ecosystem? An ecosystem is, you know, if you watch like Animal Planet or National Geographic, you know, the ecosystem is so important to facilitate the thriving of a certain species or thriving a certain animal. In the same way, the ecosystem is so important as an environment for the individual to thrive, right? You talk at the base level, you talk about the learning experience, the 4 elements there. I'm not going to go into detail, but all these form the learning experience for the learner. And if you move up from the learner to the learning communities, from the same program, these learners form a learning community. And what's important about this learning community is that they take the materials that they've learned and they apply it to the organization. And that is the most important thing, learner-generated content, right? Learner-generated content is most valuable. And from there, these learning communities, they move up to the organizational level, right? How do you drive business and strategic objectives, right? And this is where they start to drive culture change. And this is where you start to build expertise within the organization as well, right? And it is a two-way street. So from the organization, it goes down as well back to the learning communities. They tap on these learning communities and define the skill sets that are needed, right, for the organization. And back to the learner again, where these learning communities can do a teach back, right? Flip classrooms, right? Forming more experts. Maybe Glenn, you just want to talk about a little about the communities of practice that are formed under your organization as well, and how that ties into the ecosystem.
Yeah, I was just sharing with Joel earlier that it's very important within organizations around their community of practice. If the organization is setting the strategy for where the company's going, and you have, as an L&D practitioner or a facilitator, you have the opportunity to actually create a community of practice. You'll have ambassadors, you'll have sponsors through the business who actually participate in that. And they become your communication channel. They become your story. They become the ones that actually drive the messages, drive what the learners are going to be focusing on through the company. So it's not just then it's HR putting a stake in the ground or L&D. You're actually getting the businesses to actually own it, the functions to own it. So it's a really important element between setting the strategy and understanding the learning experience, obviously measuring the impact there, and what the organization is looking for in both results and culture. So a really important element, the community of practice that sits in that middle. And it's a good pressure test in regards to are you getting the cut through throughout your business. So I've always been a big fan of that learning communities, and particularly now in what we're doing with VBL. It's the communities beyond the classroom. It's no longer do you have the water cooler conversations. So it's really about creating those strong conversations, those strong networks. So very, very passionate about the learning communities. Yeah.
Can I chip in on this? I'm really loving this model. And in the learning communities dynamic and the communities of practice, what I have noticed without having your beautiful model in the head before, but just by my concrete experience, was that when, for example, you put in place peer coaching among participants, the learning goes up to a higher percentage for the person who is there peer coaching the other. So they take on their own, they take ownership of this learning while supporting someone else. And tying back to Audrey's question before, it brings the energy, it brings the engagement, and it's extremely powerful what happens. So if the strategy of the whole organization now in this COVID times understands this huge potential of using learning this way as a learning journey in this moment where everybody's at home and disconnected and having to work, I think it is really a way forward to help and stay connected, take the pulse with your employees, the whole workforce. And this whole ecosystem is a beautiful way to put it in place strategically, and then to make it happen in a concrete way with the VBL.
Yeah. You know what they say, it's the best way to learn is to teach.
Yeah.
Teach someone else, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just because we are running short on time, I just wanted to, Joelle, I just wanted to hear from you in regards to measuring impact. You've got a few, I know you've got specifically a few very key clients who are very much about measuring impact. And I saw there was a question there before too in regards to how do you actually ensure people keep their screens even on. So the behaviours and the results. Can you just talk us through that and how that connects to measuring impact here?
Yep. Can I have the next slide? Right. So for everything that we do, every learning experience, every learning program that we do, the Kirkpatrick model actually drives how we design for impact. Right. Let me just take you very briefly through the whole model. Level 1, you talk about satisfaction. Right. Do you enjoy the course? Was the course great? That's very basic at that level. Level 2, learning. Quizzes to test your learning on the course, whether you remember everything that was being taught. And then level 3, this is where it starts to get interesting. You start to measure their behavior, right? Where change actually really takes place from the content that is being taught to them, right? that managers are able to see and track their employees' behaviors change. How do they do things differently after the course, right? For example, a course of strategy. Are they taking all of these and applying it into their daily work, right? And level 4, this is like the holy grail, right, of measuring learning impact, right, where you can directly tie your learning directly to your impact on the organizational performance. So, for example, sales figures pre and post workshop, right? What's the sales figures before and what's the sales figures after? And this is really how we design all our courses. And learning has to be, of course, learning has to be fun, but more than that, it's about designing for impact, and it needs to have behavior changes, it needs to have results.
Yeah. Dorotea, any connections there, thoughts? Frozen there. I just want to Emma sent in a message before about the VBL ecosystem. Thanks for that. The learning organisation, could not agree more. From a learning organisation point of view, having that key focus around driving a learning culture is absolutely key. And we're having quite a few conversations at the moment with potential clients, which is around that learning organisation. And it doesn't always have to be the totally detailed, the Peter Senge learning organisation, the 3 stools, so on. It's very much about how do you actually ensure that people have that passion to learn. And the beauty about VBL is it actually enables that. It enables the different tone of learning to come through. So very, very good point there around learning organisation. Okay, so just want to move through now because we are running close on time, and want to obviously see if there's any other questions that come through. Just to make sure too, obviously we are in that state of play at the moment from an HR point of view, and also as facilitators, because many of the people that have dialed in are facilitators, they're trainers, they're also L&D practitioners, or they generally care about their people. So it's very important that we do have this space to have these conversations and the space to design the best VBL ecosystem possible and look at all the different stakeholders. So very, very keen that we ensure, and certainly from our point of view, that we can actually future-proof how learning can be facilitated and how it can be even improved and enhanced through VBL, so we maximise it now. So I just wanted to, with that tone, with that message, just wanted to call up the next slide there, please. We actually have an offer as part of our series of programs here. And please, if you do have any questions, please put them in now, because we will have a couple of minutes there to be able to answer any of the last minute questions. So please put them in the Q&A. We do have an offer here for the first 5 that do sign up, and we've had this in the last couple of sessions as well, which has been incredibly well taken, and being able to offer that coaching session. So for those who are looking to actually transform their learning journey, then there will be a 1-hour design session, coaching session that we'll be able to offer up. And it also includes one of our Nobi programs. So as Joel said right at the start or in the middle, Nobi spun out of Awaken Group. There are a couple of programs there, one particularly around design thinking, which is incredibly important in this time as we redesign the processes, we redesign the systems within the organisation. So we do have that offer for the first 5 sign-ups there. So please, if you would like to take that offer up, just follow the link there. And questions there. Why are you pressed for time? Because we had down for 45 minutes. Yeah, Kirkpatrick's model still surviving after all this time. Dorotea, any other comments from you before we just close out?
Yeah, just be conscious of the incredible situation we're in with the last 10 years that everybody has no time. So that's why the this asynchronous no-be platform is wonderful because of the micro-learning dynamic. So you can do 5 minutes there, 10 minutes there, when it fits you. And that is something that we cannot do without nowadays. And the follow-up is very important when you were talking about the ecosystem. How do you keep people engaged? So is the follow-up dynamic? How do you get the measurement afterwards on a quantitative level and keep people going forward? That's a very, very powerful thing that you can do as well.
Yeah, exactly, Dorotea. We are applying bite-sized learning principles right now to keep our webinars as tight as possible to 45 minutes. You realize that when it goes over there, people start losing focus. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the bite size is the micro learning. I mean, the the 5 minutes exercises, and that is, I really love that dimension.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's how it's incredibly well designed too, isn't it? So certainly from the process point of view, there's as much effort that goes into the pre-work when you're running a VBL. So the actual the design, the scripting, the whole run sheet. So actually ensuring that it's all focused on the learner. So you take out any other issues. So having that process and looking at the ecosystem pre, during, and post is vital. So so on that note, I'd love to thank Dorotea.
My pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much. Very early for you, so thank you.
No, that's okay. It's okay. Not so early.
Not so early now. And Joelle, thank you very much for your input throughout today, and obviously all the work you're doing in the blended space. So thank you very much. Thank you for everybody that's connected in today. Hope you've actually got something from it, and we'll ensure that we'll actually send you through the slides, and there's a recording that'll go through as well. So we'll be able to send that through to you. The next webinar is in a fortnight's time, and it's actually going to be touching on sales transformation. So we've got two absolute industry experts, just like having Dorotea and Joelle with us today. Two absolute experts in regards to sales transformation. Grant and David will be joining us and talking through different industries that they've been supporting through that sales transformation. And particularly when organizations now are looking at their growth strategy. They're looking at how do they actually bounce back from COVID-19. So how do they do that? And how do they ensure that their sales is at its best, its top game? So looking forward to that in a fortnight's time. Thank you to everybody that's joined in. Really appreciate it and appreciate the questions. If you have any further questions for us, please send those through and we'll most certainly get back to you. So all right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good evening.
Bye.
Good morning.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Stay safe.
You too.